This was written in by someone named Bethany. She says, I'm struggling to have any educated response to refute the claim Yeshua was calling himself a false prophet. Quote, anyone have the, I think she's posting in this comment a Facebook comment itself. Anyone have the answer to this? Mark 14:27 through 28 attempts to show Jesus fulfilling a verse in Zechariah 13:7. I, God, will strike the shepherd and the sheep will be scattered. Jesus attributes himself as being the shepherd that God will kill. But don't worry, then I, Jesus, will arise. And the arise part is not in Zechariah or anywhere in Torah, by the way. Actually, it's in the Septuagint. Ironically, Mark seems oblivious to the context of that verse. The reason the shepherd would be killed was because he will be a false prophet who will speak lies in the name of God, Zechariah 13:3. So essentially, according to Mark, Jesus identifies himself as the false prophet referenced in Zechariah, hoping this is something you know the answer to or may be able to discuss on your show. Okay. Here's one thing that I'm starting to realize about Jewish objections to Jesus, or especially the anti-missionaries. They don't read their own literature. And this is a perfect example why, or where they're not reading their own literature. Let's go look at both. Now, Mark is not the only place that references this either. This is paralleled in Matthew as well. Let's take a look. Mark 14:27 through 28 says, and Jesus said to them, you will all fall away, because it is written, I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. But after I have been raised, I will go ahead of you to Galilee. Matthew 26:31 says, then Jesus said to them, you will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike down the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered. Okay. So first of all, let's go straight to the place that Yeshua is quoting, which is Zechariah. Now, he's quoting Zechariah 13:7, and we'll get to that in just a few seconds, but I think it's important to start earlier. We have to start, and by the way, Rob, you can jump in at any time here, but I want to get these references out of the way so that our audience knows a little bit about what's going on in this passage. And we need to start all the way back in Zechariah 12. And to do that, we will start back Zechariah 12:10. I will pour out on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and the supplication, so that they will look on me, whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only son, and they will weep bitterly over him, like the bitter weeping over a firstborn. In that day there will be great mourning in Jerusalem, like the mourning of Hadadrimmon in the plain of Megiddo. The land will mourn every family by itself. In that day a fountain will be opened for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for impurity. Okay, so then he goes on to list everyone who will mourn. And so let's keep going. Now we're going to go to Zechariah 13:1, and this is 13:1 through 6, I believe. He says, it will come about in that day, declares the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, and they will no longer be remembered. And I will also remove the prophets and the unclean spirit from the land. And if anyone still prophesies, then his father and mother who gave birth to him will say to him, you shall not live, for you have spoken falsely in the name of the Lord. And his father and mother who gave birth to him will pierce him through when he prophesies. Also, it will come about in that day that the prophets will each be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies, and they will not put on a hairy robe in order to deceive, but he will say, I am not a prophet, I am a tiller of the ground. For a man sold me as a slave in my youth, and one will say to him, what are these wounds between your arms? Then he will say, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Now, 13:7, and this is the verse in question. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd. He's switched back now to 12, to the same shepherd in 12, right? And against the man, my associate declares the Lord of hosts. Strike the shepherd, that the sheep may be scattered, and I will turn my hand against the little ones. Okay, so it's not just enough for me to say, oh, it's talking about the shepherd in 12, which it obviously is, but nonetheless, let's see what Judaism throughout the ages has said. Anything to add right now, Rob?
Well, just the idea of that Yeshua used this verse to talk about himself is important, because on one hand, he understands that he is the Lord's shepherd, right? He is the shepherd. He is the one. He is the associate, if you want to call it, use that in Zechariah's terms. But he knows that he's going to get struck.
Yeah.
But it doesn't dissuade him from doing it. I mean, we know what happens in the garden, right? He is his soul basically is sorrowful unto death. I mean, and so he knows that he is going to experience the wrath, right? Because of sin. And he also knows that the sheep are going to be scattered. And these sheep, here he's talking about his disciples, and his disciples, even Peter is saying, I'll never betray you. But Yeshua is going to find himself alone, and they are going to scatter. But that's not the beautiful thing is, with the resurrection, is that we know that this wasn't the end of the story. But it, even though now we know it wasn't the end of the story, it doesn't detract from the weight of Yeshua's suffering, and understanding what is going to happen to him. But he doesn't open his mouth. He doesn't flinch. He continues to show love and truth in spite of knowing what is coming down. So that's just a powerful point on that. And I think you're going to talk about the verses used in the Dead Sea Scrolls in a messianic kind of way too, right?
Well, yeah. Okay. So if you look in Christian commentaries and at basically, the Christian scholars are going to tell you, well, obviously, it's talking about the shepherd. It's talking about the one who's pierced through in 12, that everyone's going to mourn, right? He's pierced through, and everyone mourns it. And then, in 13:7, it's talking about him being struck, and so that's the Christian side of it. What's interesting is that whoever wrote this comment, whether it's an anti-missionary or just a Jewish person who is unfamiliar with Jewish tradition, that's exactly what they're doing. They're not reading their own Jewish tradition. Let's look at what the Jewish tradition is. If you like theology, you should probably subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can do that by clicking this round thing over here. And if you like that clip, you can also find the full episode right here.